Enemy hideouts are strongholds, campfires found out in the open, or ambushes waiting for you. There's so much out in the open frontier of Red Dead Redemption 2, yet it still feels tamed and like a neutered experience. While you can clear out hideouts that are playable in the main story, such as clearing out the O'Driscolls at 6 Point Cabin, or Hanging Dog Ranch, or even taking out the Lemoyne Raiders at the mansion of Shady Belle. The sheer offering of enemy hideouts to overtake, or even the frequency of being caught in the open world by such enemies, is surprisingly few. There are 6 gang hideouts total in Red Dead Redemption 2, with some of them being quote-unquote replayable, and by that, they're only repopulated if they're tied to a main story mission, such as 6 Point Cabin. However, outside of them being tied to the mission, once cleared, that's it. They're never able to be redone again. The camp you took over is never attacked again by a group of vengeful members of the gang you took the area from. There isn't a second wave of enemies or anything like any of this. Nothing, that's it. And in a way, it's disappointing that the main Van der Linde camp never gets attacked itself. I get that may sound a little odd, but with one of the game's core pillars being showing how different the Van der Linde gang is different from other gangs in the area, I think a randomized attack by roaming O'Driscolls or a group that secretly followed a member from town back to camp would have leaned more into the rough lifestyle that the gang is subjected to. Because you can go out and cause all this mayhem in Valentine, or get ambushed by some O'Driscolls not even too far from camp, kill them all, let a couple witnesses go, and then a few moments later, just stroll back into camp like there's nothing wrong. For me, it breaks a little bit of the immersion because you know no matter what, venturing into camp, you're safe. But minus the immersion, I think in a game centered around the well-being of the Van der Linde gang and promoting unity, I think it definitely would have benefited greatly to see moments like that happen. They're vulnerable just like everybody else. And obviously hindsight is 2020, but after multiple playthroughs, I still find it harder and harder to believe no one, whether that be Colm and the vast numbers of men in his ranks sprawled all over the state, setting up traps, ambushes, attacking officers that are transporting his men, or extorting the residents of Valentine, had not managed to at least get a bare idea of where Dutch is potentially hiding out. Imagine how much more differently you would have thought about certain actions if you knew just outside of town, if you were being ambushed by O'Driscolls at gunpoint, that if you were to massacre all of them, the following night there'd be a bigger presence followed by multiple patrols of O'Driscolls in the area, only for you to continue killing them, and then the entire area starts crawling more and more with O'Driscolls that are vengeful for the lives that you've been taking all the nights previously. And with each more massacre and the increased presence of the O'Driscolls, you're putting the camp more and more in jeopardy. It would have felt like there was much more repercussions to killing other gang members out in the open world. And with it, the other gangs being much more active and capable. I get it, the whole premise is the Van der Linde gang is much more skilled. The whole point of it is being quality over quantity, the polar opposite from Colm and the O'Driscolls. But at times it's easy to feel like a lot of it is just fodder. No one really puts up that much of a fight. But minus the other gangs, on the flip side of this, you do have the question of the Pinkertons, Cornwall, and ultimately Milton. And the multiple times Milton and Ross turn up around or inside of the Van der Linde camp, you would think with the Pinkertons being employed directly by Cornwall, a man who is extremely vindictive, and as the game progresses, continues to apply more and more pressure on Milton for his lack of progress with apprehending Dutch Van der Linde. Something that's apparent towards the end of the game, where you actually see Milton and Cornwall ending a meeting.
I've spent a considerable fortune with your agency, and still nothing. This Van der Linde robs me and laughs at me. I asked for the best. I paid for the best.
We are very close, Mr. Cornwall. I know you've heard this before.
Chance, sir, send a telegram to Goldberg in New York. Tell him I won't borrow it more than 3.2%. Sorry, no, I have heard it before. And get that army man to pay his portage charge.
Yes, sir.
We are doing all we can within the confines of the law.
The law? I think we both know what you can do with your law. Find me Dutch Van der Linde. Bring him here and leave the laws to them as need them. Good day, sir.
For me, it's hard to believe that Cornwall wasn't able to get a location out of Milton, or Milton, out of annoyance with how much pressure Cornwall was putting on him, just decided to say forget it and give up the location of the Van der Linde gang. But I guess that's ultimately just a different argument. For the sake of it, you can't just say that the Van der Linde gang was never attacked out of reasons for the story to make much more sense. Because if so, the 2 times where the gang is attacked would have been a lot less meaningful. And those 2 times being when the O'Driscolls assaulted Shady Belle, when they discovered the location of that gang hideout after the torturing and killing of Kieran, and then of course at the end of the game during the chapter of Beaver Hollow when the Pinkertons finally discovered where the gang is hiding out in. Although personally I don't really count that because the gang ultimately has already fallen apart. 6 gang hideouts have always seemed a little trivial, especially without them being repopulated. I never understood why there's so little and they aren't able to be done multiple times. Rockstar's already dabbled with gang wars before, the most famous of which was possibly in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where you have to clear out a neighborhood or block ran by a rival gang. Once taken over, rival gang members that once patrolled the streets are now replaced with members that flew your colors. I don't expect a portion of the map that's ran or rather harassed by O'Driscolls or Lemoyne Raiders to be replaced by Vanderlyn members, since the Vanderlyn gang by contrast doesn't really operate by the same MO to just blatantly harass anybody, nor do they have the numbers of the O'Driscolls or Lemoyne Raiders, but a feature such as this would have felt much more appropriate for this type of game. Even if the world of Red Dead Redemption 2, where it's meant to symbolize a time where outlaws are long gone and consequently gangs are much more rare, I think they would have been able to sacrifice that narrative portion to cater a little bit more towards gameplay, or even then they could have made it more hand in hand. Whereas from Saint Denis onward, we kind of see the Vanderlyn gang really deteriorate and the story accelerate in terms of recklessness and the noose of the law ever tightening around the gang's metaphorical neck. They could have did that with the same thing as the gang hideouts. Earlier in the story, they could have made it much more abundant. They could have been repopulated and able to be redone, yet as the story progresses, the number of which starts to drop drastically. By contrast, something that has always confused me and felt a little backwards is committing a crime and being seen by a witness and then having the law sent out on you can all happen in the blink of an eye. Sometimes it happens so fast that the witness system reflects more of a 21st century telephone system than a system in the 19th century that is purely based on word of mouth. The pinpoint accuracy in which officers or even bounty hunters descend on you and your location is sometimes unbelievable. Made sure Saint Denis is an exception since there is an officer on seemingly every corner, so it wouldn't be too difficult or far-fetched for one to hear someone shouting for help. Yet in a small cattle town like Valentine, or especially the remoteness of Emerald Ranch, should not see you running away from law enforcement or a group of bounty hunters in just a minute or so of committing the crime. Moving into a future Red Dead Redemption title, I think it would be great for Rockstar to implement different kinds of varieties of the Wanted system, and in particular towns or areas that are remote from cities such as Saint Denis or bigger towns of Valentine's size have their own forms of vigilantes and militias to defend themselves. And when you do generate some type of wanted level for yourself or notoriety, they stay confined within that area, within that particular town, and it doesn't become a statewide issue. It may sound as if I'm getting off topic, but I feel they're somewhat related. Rockstar went heavy on a wanted system that was more centralized and robust than what I feel the game should have had more of. Or even, as I was saying with the hideouts, they could have made it tied to the narrative, where the beginning of the game, it wasn't so centralized, it wasn't so robust. Gang hideouts were much more abundant, and then as the story progressed, and it felt like the law was starting to have a stronger hold on this part of the country, then the wanted system would then become much more robust. The likelihood of being stopped or robbed out in the open world or running across gang hideouts would minimize and drop off drastically. And I think that approach would have been the most satisfying because it approaches it from the narrative standpoint, and it also approaches it from a gameplay standpoint where it would make sense why there's so many gang hideouts or lack thereof, yet there's such a strong police presence when you commit specific crimes in certain areas. It would have also played a lot more into the outlaw fantasy that I feel that this game at times is a little lacking of. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. What's your take on the gang hideouts or even the centralized wanted system in Red Dead Redemption 2? How would you want that stuff to change in future Red Dead titles? Let's talk down in the comments section below. And if you're new here, maybe consider subscribing for some more Red Dead Redemption content, or technically Rockstar themed content in general.